Good evening, and welcome to the virtual opening of our newest exhibition, Forever Changed, Stories from the Second World War, coming to you from the Canadian War Museum. My name is Caroline Dromaguet, Acting Director General of the museum. Pour commencer, j'aimerais souligner que le Musée canadien de la guerre se trouve sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. Je tiens également à mentionner que vous vous joignez à nous aujourd'hui à partir de nombreux endroits, proches ou lointains. Profitons-en pour saluer les propriétaires ainsi que les gardiennes et les gardiens traditionnels de ces terres. Nous attachons une grande importance à nos relations avec les nations algonquines et nous vouons à celles-ci une grande estime. Forever Changed explores the Second World War through the eyes of Canadians both on the home front and around the world. The exhibition centers on 6 main stories, supported by over 40 additional accounts of Canadians who experienced the Second World War both at home and overseas. These stories are woven together with 175 objects, over 50% of which were acquired by the Canadian War Museum within the last 15 years, meaning that most of these stories have never been told before. Nous avions prévu d'inaugurer Vie transformée le 8 mai dernier, le jour du 75e anniversaire de la victoire des Alliés en Europe. La pandémie nous a empêchés de nous réunir ce jour-là et le jour de la victoire sur le Japon en août. Mais nous tenions à souligner cet anniversaire pour honorer la mémoire de celles et de ceux qui ont fait le sacrifice ultime. Forever Changed is an important reminder of the Second World War's great personal cost to individuals, communities, and nations alike. Imagine being a young parachutist writing to his family one last time before knowingly being dropped into danger the next day. Put yourself in the shoes of a bomb girl burned on the job. Imagine the challenges faced by a prisoner of war who turned to art to endure the misery, or a Japanese-Canadian teenager who was forced to move 600 kilometers from home. And, of course, imagine the heartbreak of waving goodbye to loved ones, not knowing if you would ever see them again. Vie transformée met en lumière ces récits et bien d'autres. Nous y avons inclus les histoires de militaires qui ont servi dans l'armée, la marine et l'aviation. Nous y racontons aussi ce qu'ont vécu des Canadiennes et des Canadiens qui ont soutenu la guerre sur le front intérieur, ainsi que celles et ceux qui ont pleuré les personnes disparues et mortes au combat. Certains récits sont poignants, d'autres tragiques ou porteurs d'espoir. Mais aucun ne laisse indifférent. Over the course of this virtual exhibition opening, you will hear from members of the Canadian War Museum team, as well as from family members of some of the people featured in the exhibition. I'll be back a little later to give you a sneak peek at the exhibition. I would now like to hand it over to my colleagues Tim and Britt, who will share some of their favorite stories from the exhibition.
I'm Tim Cook, curator of Forever Change, Stories from the Second World War.
Et je suis Britt Braaten, spécialiste en développement créatif de l'exposition. En partageant les récits de Canadiens et de Canadiennes au pays et dans le monde entier, Vie transformée offre une nouvelle compréhension de la Seconde Guerre mondiale.
Forever Change presents stories of tremendous courage and loss, of grief and pride, of defeat and ultimate victory, and all through the lens of ordinary Canadians.
One such Canadian is Ethel Mulvaney, a teacher who was in Singapore when it fell to the Japanese. She was taken prisoner. We show Ethel's Bible from her imprisonment, and while its words offered comfort in her darkest moments, the damage to the Bible speaks to a more literal form of nourishment when a starving Ethel ate the spine of the book, reasoning that the glue, made of horses' hooves, would give her desperately needed protein. This simple book bears witness to the tragic realities of this war.
One of the most gut-wrenching stories focuses on twin brothers Grant and Roy Campbell. They enlisted together, trained together, and served overseas with the Royal Canadian Air Force. They died within a month of each other in April and May 1944. I can scarcely imagine the shock and sorrow that their parents faced after the arrival of the telegrams informing them of their boys' deaths, or when they held the charred purse that they had given to their son Grant, which was found near his body and returned to them. These objects tell powerful stories of lives forever changed.
L'histoire d'Albert Sauquet, un conducteur pour une usine de munitions, en est aussi une de courage. Lorsqu'un chargement de nitrocellulose prit feu à l'arrière de son camion, Albert s'élança vers les flammes hautes de 6 mètres pour sauver un collègue piégé par l'incendie. Les 2 hommes ont survécu, mais Albert a subi de graves brûlures. Son geste héroïque lui valut la médaille de Georges, une décoration destinée aux civils, reconnaissant les actes de bravoure exceptionnels. Albert est l'un des 3 Canadiens à avoir reçu cette médaille pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale.
Able seaman George Boyer left behind his family of 13 to serve on the Canadian-crewed aircraft carrier HMS Nabob. We tell Boyer's story through archival letters and his medal set, but also in a reconstructed space of when Nabob was struck by a German torpedo. Visitors will be able to experience a simulation of the moments after the deadly attack. We would not be able to present George Boyer and the dozens of Canadians in the exhibition without the work of everyone at the corporation and the dedicated team at the War Museum. Thank you.
What we've tried to do is really tell a broad range of stories, people from different backgrounds, people of different ages, people who were doing different things during the war. And so the hope is that, you know, regardless of your own personal background or your family background, you'll find a story in there that you can connect to.
Forever Changed is about people. It's about Canadians who were shaped by the Second World War, who contributed to the victory. They have families across this country. There are millions of Canadians who have a link to someone who served in the Second World War. It's only fitting then that we now hear from descendants of some of the people whose stories are featured in the exhibition.
My name is Pam McDonald, and I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran and a British war bride. My father, John McDonald, served in England as a radar technician during the war. One day out cycling near the city of Worcester, he met my mother, Gwen, and they were married in Worcester in 1943. When the war ended, my father was shipped home very quickly. My mother followed 8 months later with my eldest brother aboard the ship Aquitania. She told me that the day the ship arrived in the Halifax harbor, she went to the other side of the ship to say goodbye to her old country and her old way of life. She then joined all the other war brides and children, crowded along the railings to welcome their new country. The end of the World War II gave my parents a new lease on life, and they were the lucky ones. My father, because of his wartime service, was able to study at the University of Alberta and graduate with a degree in electrical engineering. My mother threw herself into her new way of life, and through the help of the CBC, became a Canadian and gave back to this country in more ways than one.
Mon père, Marcel Ouimet, n'avait que 29 ans quand il a été nommé chef des correspondants de guerre de Radio-Canada et a quitté sa femme Jacqueline et sa petite-fille Paul pour l'Europe en 1943. Mon père s'est distingué pendant près de 200 reportages par sa façon de raconter les événements avec beaucoup d'émotion, rempli d'images et mettant l'accent sur ce que les soldats canadiens et les civils européens pendant la guerre pouvaient vivre. On le nommait Hemingway français. Le jour J, il était le seul journaliste canadien de langue française à débarquer et a réussi à être un des premiers à diffuser des reportages de Bernières-sur-Mer. En étant un des premiers à diffuser directement du front, il a risqué sa vie maintes fois et a été blessé. Pendant la guerre, mon père et ma mère se sont écrits plus de 300 lettres. Ma mère se considérait chanceuse d'entendre sa voix régulièrement à la radio et de savoir qu'elle était vivante. Mon père était un homme très humble. Il serait ému de savoir qu'il a été le sujet de plusieurs émissions télédiffusées et de livres depuis sa mort en 1985. Il a été particulièrement célébré lors du 75e anniversaire du débarquement. Mes sœurs et moi avons hâte de visiter la nouvelle place Marcel Ouimet à Bernières-sur-Mer.
My name is Richard Weiss. I want to tell you a story about my father, Charles Henry Bice, and my grandfather, Henry Charles Bice. They are both in the War Museum and the Hall of Valor. Charles Bice is the highest decorated Indigenous soldier of World War II. He went from residential school to Buckingham Palace, where he was decorated by King George VI for gallantry. He received the Distinguished Conduct Medal and the Military Medal. Very few men have ever received both the DCM and the MM. One was his father, Henry, in World War I, making them the highest decorated father and son in Canada.
My father was a 21-year-old signalman in the Canadian Army contingent, and he was sent over to Hong Kong in the fall of 1941. 3 weeks after they arrived, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and the boys spent the next 4 years in prison camp in Japan, enduring starvation and beatings, etc. Yet my dad would often tell us in retrospect, he'd say, "I survived, so I'm grateful." And his motto, all his life, was forget, no, but forgive, yes. I would like to briefly share with you a quick personal story that my dad had shared with us from prison camp. Apparently, after several years of imprisonment, some of his Canadian buddies who knew he was an artist decided to surprise him with a piece of canvas which they had cut off from the flap of their prison tent at the risk of being beaten. And they also took some oil from one of the trucks and found a stick which my father sharpened and used to paint this depiction of their life in prison camp. And I would like to conclude by saying briefly that I am forever grateful to my father, whose life as an ex-POW was an example in how to follow a path to forgiveness. And he has gifted me throughout my own life when the fires of injustice and disquieting circumstances in our own time period have come forth. And it's given me the strength and courage to carry on when I remember his voice saying, "To forget, no, but to forgive, yes."
Ces récits sont tout simplement émouvants. Merci à Tim et à Britt, mais aussi à Pam McDonald, à René Ouimet, à Rick Bice et à Dorianne Alistair Winkler, ainsi qu'aux nombreuses personnes qui ont si gracieusement contribué à cette exposition par leurs récits. Forever Changed opens on December 4th and will run until September 6th, 2021. For more details on the exhibition, how to visit, as well as related activities, please go to our website at warmuseum.ca. We'll also be featuring some of the exhibition's individual stories on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. We're proud of the way this has all come together in these challenging times, and even more proud of the people whose lives and stories are shared throughout. Merci d'avoir partagé ce moment avec nous. Nous espérons que vous pourrez venir voir l'exposition. Et maintenant, sans plus tarder, jetons-y un coup d'œil.